Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemaphilepod.com. When a beloved teacher is tragically killed in a hit-and-run crash in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, a grassroots movement emerges to transform a notoriously dangerous four-lane boulevard into a safe two-lane street with protected bike lanes. While many applauded the proposed change, it also sparked a backlash that led to a lot of different things, and they're all explored in this wonderful documentary film called Changing Lanes. We're joined today by the director of the film, and that would be Ben Wolf. Ben Wolf, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And as I mentioned to you before we got started, this is something that I had a brush with in terms of my earlier career in public works and in Los Angeles County. We were talking about it, and at the time it interested me. What excited me was the opportunity for change, because people complain about traffic in the Los Angeles area and the basin's horrific. What I was hearing was a lot of creativity around this, but seeing your film, seeing the history of what you can do, and also the history of why we are where we are in terms of major metropolitan areas, how congested and crowded they are, and the dominance of the motor vehicle. This is great. This is a great way to get yourself up to speed on the possibilities. How did you get involved into making this film?
First of all, my career has mostly been as a cinematographer on other people's films, documentaries, commercials, a variety of types of films. For about 20 years, that's what I've been doing. I've wanted to direct something of my own for a long time. And it was the pandemic that I think finally gave me time because my normal work really slowed down. Cities and transportation have always been real interests of mine. I used to race bikes, and as long as I've been in New York, which is about 30 years, I've been getting around on a bike often, although I also drive and walk and take transit and all of these modes. But in the time I've been here, things have changed a lot for cycling, and it's been interesting and often exciting to see developments, to see it going from a real marginal activity to quite mainstream. I'm also someone that travels a lot around the world for my work, and I've seen how other cities are laid out and how, in many ways, I feel like I wish we were like those cities, like a Barcelona or a Paris now or Copenhagen, where it does seem like the streets are safer and more pleasant and just places you want to spend time, as opposed to you're screaming at people and dodging e-bikes and cars and everything else. So that was the specifics. I also felt like I wanted to do a movie about politics just because living in this time in America, I feel like it's just something we're all dealing with. And, everybody has their own feelings, but most people's feelings are that we have some kind of a problem. And that's certainly my feeling. And I wanted to explore that in a way that wasn't dogmatic or sort of preachy, but just to find like a specific story that is a political story that hopefully has some sort of is kind of like a microcosm of bigger issues in our culture.
And that's addressed in the film, the way that you just described it. The idea behind, as I mentioned in the introduction, behind why we are where we are. And I think New York's maybe in America, the best place to illustrate this huge transformation of public spaces. And just a slight comment on what you were saying about addressing this particular issue is how politicized sort of we galvanize ourselves around kind of lens that takes away the public interest, because safe streets are of interest to no matter your political stripe.
You would think.
You would think, but and I just think we're just so so polarized on so many other things. But again, this is another great thing about Changing Lanes, is that it offers us a way forward if we just take a step back and look at what's best for humans.
The movie is ultimately, I think, an inspirational and somewhat upbeat movie. That said, during most of the 3 year time I was shooting it, I didn't expect it to have this sort of happy ending that it has. And I don't want to give everything away, but that was a wonderful surprise that things played out the way they did. For most of the time I was working on this, it was not clear that we were going to have a positive outcome in that particular story of that particular street. The resistance to change was very strong. And the last mayoral administration in New York under Mayor Adams, we had a sense that it was fairly corrupt, and now we have probably more than a sense. We have sort of evidence that was the case, and it was really preventing a lot of progress from being made.
Yeah, and I know that there's a part of New York and around Brooklyn that's going through a huge transformation. I know that that's been an ongoing part of the New York story, but that's one of the things I admire about documentary filmmakers. You just described it in a way, and that is you didn't know how this was going to turn out,
Right.
and you continued to pursue it because I think your instincts about what's a good story, and I think regardless of how this could have gone, I think it still would have made a great documentary. I think either a cautionary tale and or something else. And I think you were on the right track no matter what, I think, with this story.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I agree that it would have been a movie worth watching, but everybody likes a happy ending,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's true with documentary of this nature, not a sort of historical documentary, but when you're telling a story that's unfolding in the present, you don't quite know what you're getting, and I do think there's a fair amount of luck involved in those cases. Like I worked on a sort of sports movie that was following a bunch of people that were trying to make it to the Olympics. In the end, none of the people made it to the Olympics. So it was like, sometimes you just aren't lucky. But in this case, I was lucky and my instincts told me that this was going to be a dramatic and interesting story almost no matter what. I was early on looking for sort of a story of the streets, and I was following a bunch of stories. I went to a meeting about this street, a meeting that was promoted as a public meeting that was held, in fact, organized by the folks that didn't want the street to change. And they forcibly locked out the part of the community that wanted change. And right there, I thought, this is nuts. And this looks like this is going to be a great story. So, but just because conflict is the essence of drama, and the level of conflict was just over the top. And I thought, okay, I have a feeling this is going to be interesting if I stick with it.
And it was blatant. It
Yeah.
was it was
Yeah.
just we've got bigger guns than you do kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And,
And I don't,
yeah,
and fundamentally undemocratic. Like this is
right.
not how things are supposed to work.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning, in a sense, the New York story part of this. And I love the footage that you have in the film where, as is said in the film, the streets were run by people. The
Mm.
streets of New York were the purview of people. And I just sort of, not what, you don't have to get into a tremendous amount of detail, but just to give us a sense of just what that meant.
It was important to me in telling this particular story of a particular street to give some context, like historical context. Because I think one of the assumptions that seems to be made a lot is that the way things are now is the way it's always been,
Hmm.
and changing it is, a grave mistake or something. And I just thought it's important to understand that these streets have been a variety of different things, used in different ways, laid out differently over history. And although in most American cities, including in New York, the streets in our lifetime have mostly been places for automobiles, that was not. And in many places, that probably was the original use of the streets because many places aren't that old. But New York goes back, a couple hundred years. So here, those streets were created before the automobile. And as you noted, initially, it was pedestrians, horses, and streetcars. That's what streets were. And also, what's wonderful about New York is it's such a heavily photographed and filmed place that there's no shortage of great footage to show what it was like. And it was a much more of a public space where people were mingling and commerce was happening. And during the course of the 20th century, it went from that to pretty much just too dangerous for anything to be happening on it other than cars. And that's sort of broadly speaking, probably the story of most of America in the 20th century.
Yeah.
That sort of inner cities became a lot less hospitable to people because of the automobile. And I do want to say I'm not anti-car. I have a car. I actually have three cars, the truth be told, because I love old cars. I have a couple fun old cars. But I have a car, a little van that I use for work because often I have to move camera gear around. But if I'm not moving camera gear around, it's not my preferred way to get around the city. It's very slow and expensive and frustrating. And I think in general, cars have not served us well when it comes to sort of dense city environments. There's just not enough room for everybody to have a car and using a car. Like I added it up. I spend about $1,000 a month to use my between parking the car, insuring the car, and maintaining the car. It's a major expense, which I would be thrilled to not have,
Yeah.
but I need it for my work essentially.
Well, from a personal perspective, I've been to New York 3 times, and over that course of those 3 times, I've been there over a month. So for me, it's afforded me an opportunity to kind of get a feel for it. And the car, especially, and this the first time I was there was in 1992. So it's been over 30 years ago. It felt like to use a car was discouraged by the city, even though that wasn't what I was seeing in real time. I was seeing an overwhelming amount of use of cars, but it was such a difficult place to get around just hopping into a taxi and trying to get across
Yeah.
town. All of it. It's felt like that. So I'm going back 30 years. I'm sure it got a lot worse before they started to understand that it was maybe there's another way forward, but that's just maybe not.
I
Maybe
mean, New
they,
York, I will say New York is a bit of a special case in America in that in New York, most people don't have cars. So
yeah,
right
yeah,
away,
yeah.
and we have subways and buses and quite a lot of bike lanes and whatnot. So it's kind of an outlier. It's almost halfway to what like a lot of European cities are, but it's not all the way.
And that's what I appreciate about New York. It surprised me in so many different ways. The energy there, there's the things that most people talk about when they go there, were evident to me. But also, what struck me over the years, the couple of times I've been back since, is that there's real community. There's a significant working class element in New York that I never thought of it that way. And over that period of time since I was there and began to realize that, I've come to appreciate just how much more New York is representative of the working class across the country than I was ever led to believe, in the sense of they want to be heard. And I think in New York, that's what's become evident to me ever since. And it was reinforced by the documentary Drop Dead City and some others
Yeah.
that I've seen. They really have a stake in the quality of life, and as evidenced by the recent election for mayor. I think all of those things, they're there and they're in this film as well. The
Yeah.
evidence of a communities who are engaged in their community in a way we're not here on the West Coast.
Certainly the neighborhood that this movie takes place in, which is Greenpoint, Brooklyn, until fairly recently was a largely working class, largely Polish working class, actually, neighborhood. It has, like so much of the city, been gentrifying quite a lot. And that is also the source of a lot of the sort of political tension in that community. And the roots of this fight is that a lot of it is sort of the people who've been there a long time versus the newer and more affluent people who are coming in. And things like bikes and bike lanes for many people become a sort of symbol of gentrification. And so often the fight isn't really about bikes. It's really about just change and
Okay.
who's in charge now. And a lot of people have a tendency to, they like what's familiar, and when things start changing, they don't like that.
Oh yeah, and that's a good point. That's a great point. We just want to quickly remind our listeners we're speaking with Ben Wolf. He is the director of a documentary film called Changing Lanes. It's going to be screening here in Los Angeles beginning on April 16th. I believe that's at a Lemley Theater. Are you going to be at the Lemley
Yeah, it's going to be at four Lemley theaters: the Royal, the Monica,
Town Center?
Glendale, and
Town
Town
Center.
Center.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's all beginning on Thursday, April 16th.
it'll be the
And
16th to the 20th.
to the 20th, and you're going to be here for some Q&As. It looks like
Yeah,
you'll be at the Royal on Thursday and at
right.
the Monica on that Monday, following Monday on the 20th.
And at Glendale on the Saturday.
Okay, that's not listed. Okay, great. And so that would be the
It's
7th,
a matinee on the 18th.
18th. Yeah, 18th. These are all, I'm sure you're familiar. You've probably been out to Los Angeles to the Lemleys. I know you used to
Sure.
live out here, but yeah, the great theater chain of this area for sure. There's a particular special guest in the documentary film Changing Lanes. For those of us familiar with David Byrne and his work and his affection for lo-fi and for just different ways of looking at life and looking at the places that he's lived in. It's great to see him. Great to see him. How did he become a part of this?
Well, I've been fortunate to have worked with Mr. Byrne on a few different projects over the years. I shot a concert documentary with him maybe 15 years ago called Ride, Rise, Roar. In making that, I learned that he really does ride a bike around the city, and when he's on tour, he tends to bring a bike and has his whole band have bring bikes, and it's great because they're really only performing in the evening, and so they have some time during the days wherever they are, and he's I think something that he's done to relieve stress and sort of enjoy his travels has been to they'll go for a little ride and during the in the morning they'll go to a local museum or something like that.
Mm.
Initially, I approached him for this project largely just because I thought it would raise the profile of the project, which of course it does. But also, he is a very insightful man and seemed like the right voice to talk about both cycling in the city, how it's changed because he's been here even longer than me and biking all that time, and also he's a good person to talk about the different ways different cities are laid out as he travels so much.
Yeah, and he's even the sound of his voice, even just hearing him talk, he has a certain cadence to the way and the
Yeah,
sound, the tone of his voice. I'll call it soothing. It's inviting. It's I don't
it
know
is.
exactly to describe it, but every time I see him, in a talk show or whatever, he just has a certain bearing to him that it feels like, okay,
I think he was a great addition to the movie.
yeah,
We found ourselves using that interview quite a bit, maybe more than we initially thought we would, just because he has intelligent things to say and he says them in a way that sort of only he would.
yeah. There's another significant subject in the film. There are many, and I love the variety of people that you have talking to us about the changes, their approach, the perspective. Janet Sadik Khan, who was New York City Transportation Commissioner, obviously very intelligent, very well
Yeah.
spoken in terms of these issues. And she drops into the film at points to sort of give us a kind of a bigger picture and or understanding why the pushback is happening in the way it's happening. I thought she was a great sort of guide, if you will, for us in the film.
She was the most difficult interview for me to secure. I really felt I needed to get her. It took a couple of years before
Really?
I got her. Yeah, she's a very public figure who's on the road a lot. She consults now with cities all over the world. She didn't know me, and I wasn't working for some big established company in this. It was really my own personal project. So my initial inquiry was met with one of those, sounds like a great project, but we're busy. Good luck, kind of things. And I was sort of crushed, but I was determined. So I ended up interviewing, and several of these interviews are in the movie, people that had worked under her
Yeah.
in the government. And once I kind of got to know those people, they sort of advocated for me with her, and eventually I got her, and I was thrilled. And after Robert Moses, who's a name that everybody knows, she's probably the next most important figure in literally in the history of New York City transportation, as far as an individual who had power and did something with it. Didn't
Yeah.
just sort of some little incremental tweak here or there. She had a real progressive agenda, and she had the support of the mayor, and so things happened, dramatic things in a pretty short amount of time. And that's maybe the biggest question the movie is about change broadly. Like, why is it so hard? And why does it sometimes happen dramatically, but so much of the time doesn't happen at all? And not that
Yeah.
I have all the answers, but I think the film at least sort of raises the question and shows us instances what it took for real change to happen.
Yeah, and is it Emily Gallagher? Do I have
Yeah,
that right? Yeah,
that's right.
she's an important part in that sense that she's lower on the food chain, if you will, in terms of affecting local issues. But her perspective is very welcome and very much she's a part of this particular community. And there's a catalyst for a lot of what happens. It's around the death of a local school teacher, a beloved local school teacher who died in a hit by a car and died. So we get that very micro look at that. And then she gives
Yeah.
us these perspectives about how things, she's seen change in a hurry in certain places, and other ways it seems like it's a biblical enterprise to get it to change at other times.
Yeah, she's an amazing lady. So she's the state assembly person that represents this neighborhood. Yeah, she seems like not a typical politician. She sort of came out of activism, and this street had been a cause of hers for a long time. I mean, since she lived in the neighborhood, she talks about witnessing crashes there like 15 years ago and trying to do something about it as an activist and just being sort of frustrated that nothing was changing. And eventually she becomes a representative, and largely through her hard work, things actually do happen.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something. I'm going to sound like a film reviewer, but people listening to our conversation, this may not strike you as the most exciting subject you'll come across in terms of your viewing of documentaries, but it is such a well put together, and the incremental steps that this film takes us through to understand it, what's happening, why the streets are important to be for all of us to be concerned about. But it's a primer on a lot of other things that if you care about them and there's something to do with your community, it's a primer. It's a road, in some ways, a roadmap for you to understand what it takes to do those kinds of things that you feel are important for a group of people to get together and do. And for that reason alone, and it's really, really well done. I never felt that I was going down kind of a side street, so to speak, pardon me, in this film. I always felt that you were moving the story forward. And I just think, again, it's an editing exercise, and I'm sure it was a challenge to put all these pieces together, but it's really interesting, and it really does keep you engaged from start to finish. And I'm just saying.
Well, I'm very
So
happy to hear all that. And I do want to give a lot of credit to my editor, who is the other sort of really key creative collaborator in this project. And her name is Kristen Bai. She worked on this for a couple years with me. And I give her half the credit for the movie that exists. I did the production, but how you weave all of this, I
yeah.
probably had 100 hours, all kinds of interviews and events on that street, but how you turn that into sort of a coherent and entertaining, 75 minutes is a real challenge.
Well, again, let's shout out again to Kristen Bye, Bye. Little plug for her if anyone's
Absolutely.
listening.
I would like to give credit to the two other people that
Okay.
contributed a lot. One is the archival producer, who's Prudence Arndt, who helped just find all that great old footage to, again, sort of tell the history of our streets. And the other is Andrew Morocco, who's a composer who did the music, who I thought did a wonderful job.
And congratulations to this guy named Ben Wolf as
Oh, geez.
director and producer, and as well as cinematographer on Changing Lanes. It's very, very, very well done. And again, once again, just to get people an idea that April 16th, it'll be playing at the Laemmle Royal. And by the way, one of your moderators is a senior director of special projects for LA Metro Office of Strategic Innovation. That sounds fun right there. Yeah.
Yeah, my hope is that when we have screenings in different cities, that we can have, people with local expertise who can relate it to what's happening in that city. Because it seems like most cities are having similar struggles. Yeah, it's my hope that, and it's a nice thing about cities is there's so many of them. We can look to different cities for examples of what, ideas,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is not unexplored territory. It's just a matter of sort of opening one's eyes and seeing what the alternatives are.
Absolutely. So, in addition to the April 16th, which we mentioned at the Laemmle Royal, and this, I believe, is at the 7 o'clock
Correct.
screening. As we said, it's also going to be screening across the Laemmle Empire at the Monica on April 20th, a 7 p.m. show, which will be moderated by Elisa Walker. And then you're going to be at the town center and the Laemmle Glendale in those days in between the 16th and the 20th. You had it down better than I did.
Yeah, it's all I would direct people to the film's website, which is changinglanesdoc.com,
Okay.
DOC, and I list all the links to all the screenings there. And you can also reach out to me there if you're interested in screening it in your city, please feel free. I'd love to get it out as much as I can.
Ben Wolf, cinematographer extraordinaire across many,
Oh, thank
many
you.
great films, documentary films and otherwise. And this one is certainly no exception. Changing Lanes. Ben Wolf, thank you so very much for spending some time with us here on Cinemaphile.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.